Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey folks, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called the Bermuda Crisis: Discovery Dawning, and it's from the publisher Lysander Games. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page. There's going to be a link up in the top corner of your screen and also down in the description section underneath this video that will take you to the Kickstarter page, find out more information, and hopefully consider backing the project. Now, what is the Bermuda Crisis? This is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players where you are explorers who are actually exploring the Bermuda Triangle and the islands that are there that are full of this weird and mysterious artifacts and the strange aura of power all around it, where people either get great power or fall into great misfortune, and you are trying to manipulate those forces for your own gain. You're going to build camps and upgrade them in order to have a better stranglehold on the terrain there. You're going to find powerful artifacts and use them to the best of your ability. You're going to find different, they're called venture cards and boost cards and ambush cards in order to stymie your opponents. You're going to have catalysts, which are going to turn fate in your direction. All of these different things are going to lead you towards different victory paths, whether it's getting more in tune with nature or whether it's getting more victory points. There's different ways to win the game and come out ahead of your opponents and be the ultimate relic hunter, artifact hunter, explorer of the Bermuda Triangle. Let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played with a prototype version of the game. So it needs to be noted that some of the things that you see here may change in the final version of the game after it's kickstarted. Then we're going to come back. I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Bermuda Crisis: Discovery Dawning. This is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players. The goal of the game, well, there's actually several different ways that you can finish the game and win, and there's different paths that you can take. As I mentioned in the intro, the theme is that you are all explorers who are exploring the Bermuda Triangle and trying to find rare artifacts and use the special abilities and powers of the aura of the land in order to take out your opponents or to hinder them in some way, shape, or form. So basically, and we're going to cover all these in more detail, there's 3 different ways that the game can end and that someone can win. The first is if someone gets to 14 victory points. Now, you're going to have these chips, these victory point chips, which are actually going to be used as well for place markers on your mat for all of your different camps and camp upgrades. And also certain cards will require you to take chips as well. And those are basically, as well as being placeholders for those types of things, they're also going to be victory points. And if someone can acquire 14 of them, they're going to win the game. Also, there are nature points. You'll actually notice on the backs of these cards here, these the boost and ambush mystique cards, they have 2 nature point symbols, and those are also going to be on the other sides of these cards as well. If the game ends via the Discovery Dawning track, which is to say that every time an artifact comes out in the game, this chip is going to move around the track. If it makes it to the finish line, then it comes down to nature points. Whoever has the most nature points at that point in the game is going to be the winner. The final way is if someone manages, and this is the most difficult way, to get all 3 pieces of Brian Horn's scroll. Now, there are 3 pieces of the scroll. There's one of them in the rare artifacts deck, and there's one of them in the common artifacts deck, and there's also a larger piece of the scroll in the venture deck that looks like that. Every time you get one of these pieces of the scroll, you're just going to put it face down in front of you, and it can't be destroyed. You can give it away or trade it away if you really want to, but it can't be destroyed or purposefully taken out from under you. And if someone is able to get all 3 pieces, they're going to immediately win the game. You obviously can't trade the scroll or a piece of the scroll if it's going to let someone win the game. Now, at the start of the game, in turn order, every player is going to get 3 common resources and 1 rare resource from the appropriate decks. And I'll go ahead and show you what some of those resources look like. We're going to start off with the common resources. you just have things like water, and then in the rare deck you have things like diamond and oil, and these are resources you're going to use to make upgrades on your camp, as well as purchasing cards from one of the Mystique decks. Now there's also other things you'll find here. There's a piece of the scroll, like I mentioned before, but there's also artifacts. Now artifacts are in both types of decks, the rare and the common decks, and they function the same way. When you gain an artifact, you're going to put it face up in front of you so that all the other players can see that you've gained an artifact. You'll move up the Discovery Dawning track, because that's what happens every time someone gets an artifact, and then you'll leave it in front of you, and you can use one artifact per turn by discarding it, but you can have multiple artifacts in your possession at any given time, and they can do a lot of things. You can discard it to draw one of the Mystique cards, one of the 3 different colored larger cards. You can disable or enable someone's camp by putting this artifact onto their camp mat. It can become a wild resource, so in other words, you can use it as any resource that you want. You can destroy an ambush or a boost card that has been put into play, or you can rotate any venture card, which will become more clear in a moment. So the artifacts are going to be very important in order to not only have a very powerful ability to use, but it's also potentially going to end the game by moving up the Discovery and Dawn track. Now let's focus on the Discovery Dawning track, since we just mentioned it for a moment here, because as players play or draw and play artifacts, and as this moves around, special abilities are going to get kicked off. So for instance, at the 4 number here, it says everyone draws a Catalyst card. If you go up, it says everyone draws an Ambush card. Everyone draws a Boost card. If it gets to 10, you lose one of the Stability Stones. You're going to put a number of Stability Stones equal to the number of players. So in this setup, 3, you're going to discard one of those. And then when you get to number 11, it says you can only continue down to 12 if there are no Stability Stones remaining. Otherwise, you go back to 5. So in other words, you're going to go up to 11 and then back to 5 a couple of times in a 3-player game, or a few times. And then once you get back around, you're going to move down to the number 12, where it says everyone draws any one Mystique playable immediately. 13 destroys all artifacts in play, because this is essentially the whole island structure in the Bermuda Triangle falling apart because we've messed with the artifacts too much. And then finally, if it gets down to the finish space, it's Discovery Dawning, and the game ends. And then you're going to add up your nature points. Now let's talk about the larger cards that are down here. First, you've got the Mystique cards. The Mystique cards come in 3 different varieties. You have Venture, Boost, and Ambush. And on the back, they'll tell you what resources you need to discard, the cards you get from the common and rare decks, in order to be able to draw those cards. So you have, for the Venture cards, any 3 resources. For Boost, it's any 3 rares. And for Ambush, it's any 3 common. And it says right on the back here that the Boost and Ambush are going to be worth 2 nature victory points. Now, let's talk about the Venture first. The Venture cards are sort of a risk-reward thing, because when you purchase them, you notice that they're double-sided here. When you purchase them for yourself, you're always going to leave them on the positive side. So in this case, the Recycle card, notice that it's going to be worth 1 nature point. The Recycle ability says that once per turn, you can exchange one of your resources for a resource from the discard pile, excluding artifacts. However, if someone uses their artifact to force you to rotate this card, it turns into Prodigal. Now, it also turns into 2 nature points as a compensation, but it says you cannot use artifacts to draw or eliminate Boost or Ambush Mystiques. You effectively lose some of the effectiveness of your artifacts. Compare that to Sudden Progress, which simply says that you gain a victory point. You're going to take a victory point chip. However, if it gets flipped around by someone else, you lose a victory point, but again, it converts into 2 nature points. Now, let's talk about the yellow cards, which are the Boost cards, and then we'll talk about the Ambush cards. And these are going to work in the same way, in that when you purchase the card using that amount of resources, you're going to put it face down in front of you, look at the ability. However, on your turn, you can flip this card face up and discard it for its effect. All of these are going to have the same activation type. And they all do different things. And these are just a couple of examples, by the way. I don't want to say that these are all the cards in the deck. I just want to show you a couple of them. Same thing with the Venture cards. Gift of the Tide says that it provides you with any 1 resource, whereas Gift of the Trees lets you draw +3 cards at the end of your turn. Now, the Ambush cards, which are going to function in the same way, are all about attack. These are what you're going to do in order to hinder your opponent. So Dashed Hope says you can choose 1. Each opponent discards all but 7 resources from their hand, or all of their face-down Mystique cards. Then you've got Fade from Reality, which is eliminate 1 artifact or draw eliminate 1 artifact and then draw a resource. So you're killing someone's artifact in order to draw a resource. And the last type of card that we're going to talk about are the Catalyst cards, which function a bit differently. The way you're going to work with these, you'll draw one of the Catalyst cards, and you're going to put it face down in front of you, just like with the Mystique cards. However, the way these function are essentially secret goals for yourself. And what secret goal you have to work towards depends on how many victory points you have at a given time. So for instance, Ancient Protectors here says that if you have 7 or less victory points, then you have to have the fewest nature points. Ties are okay. But if you had 8 or more victory points, then you want to have the fewest victory points. Again, ties are okay. If you can meet either one of those conditions at a given time, you get to solve this catalyst. You flip it up, and then you take a victory point from the pile and put it onto the card, meaning you've got yourself an extra victory point. Then there's cards like Hitman, which says that you can either make at least 3 attacks in one turn or make at least 5 attacks in one turn. The more chips that you have, the more difficult it's going to be for you to get the achievement. And Cutting Edge, have an advanced camp ability that no opponent has, or have an ultimate camp ability that no opponent has, and then you'll get your victory point chip. Well, that seems like as good a time as any to talk about your camp. Now, first thing I want to mention is that these boards are double-sided. It's recommended that you start off on the basic skills map, but if you go over to the other side, you have the advanced skills map. The only difference is these are different categories of your camp, types of your camp that you're going to be upgrading as you go along. On the basic map, you don't have any choice as to what upgrades you can pick when you get to a new level, from basic to advanced to ultimate. On the advanced side, you have a choice as to which one you can pick. And in fact, you can go back and upgrade the other ones that you missed the first time. So that's going to be for advanced players only, but it's definitely something you should consider if you play the game more and more and gain more experience with it. So what these are going to be special abilities and the potential to get victory point chips. On each of these different abilities, and we'll start off in the basics here, it has the different types of resources you have to discard. So, for instance, in this case, it's 2 lumber and 2 coal. And if you do, you get to if you can discard those resources, you can put a victory point chip there, and then you gain the ability. You may complete the top or bottom catalyst goal, regardless of your current victory point total. Then, you have to build these in order from bottom to top. Then, when you get up to the next level, this works a little bit different. If you can discard the appropriate amount of resources, as you can see here, then you get to put 2 chips out, one here and one here, and you'll gain the ability, which in this case is draw and always hold an additional catalyst card. And then up at the top, with the ultimate ability, you can see there's sort of a trend here. Again, if you can discard the amount of resources, which is much more this time, then you can put 2 chips down and you gain the ultimate ability. Once per turn, you may discard a catalyst from your hand for a new one from the top of the draw pile. And all the different categories will have different types of abilities. So on this one, Mystiques cost you one resource less to buy. The advanced ability here is you are immune to ambush card attacks, and the ultimate ability in that column is draw +3 resources at the end of your turn, and so on and so forth. So you get much, much better abilities, which are going to help you out during the course of the game, but you're also getting victory points at the same time. So this is another different path that you can take in your strategy. So that's a general overview of the game and how it's going to work from turn to turn. When it's your turn, you have your choice of doing any of the different following things. So you can build or upgrade any number of your camps and each of the different rows by discarding the appropriate resources and getting the right victory points. You can buy a Mystique from any of the 3 piles. If it's a Venture, you immediately put it on its positive side up. You can activate any number of the camp or Venture abilities you have that create actions. You can place any number of your ambush or boost cards that you own. You can drain any number of your artifacts. The artifacts that you have in front of you, you can use them and discard them for their abilities. Or you can initiate any number of trades. That's another thing you can do in this game. You can actually trade with the other players. And you can really trade however you want within some limitations. But for instance, you can say, well, I'll trade this artifact for a few resources. Or you can make future promises, like if you don't use those ambush cards on me, then I won't use my artifact cards on you. Things like that. The only limitations are you can't really trade your victory point chips or cards that have been attached to your camps. You can't trade venture cards. You can't trade, because those could be potentially bad for you, so you're kind of stuck with them. And you can't trade any of your catalysts either, nor can you trade any pieces of scroll if it's going to make the other player win the game, because why would you do that? In any case, when your turn is over, you are going to end your turn by drawing 4 resources in any distribution of common and rare that you like. But you have to decide beforehand how you're going to draw them. So you have to decide before you can't like draw 2 common cards and say, oh, well, now I'm going to draw 2 rare from my other ones. You have to decide up front, I'm drawing 2 of these, 2 of these, 4 of these, or so on. And that's pretty much the game. That is the Bermuda Crisis. You are trying to meet one of those different victory point conditions, either getting victory point chips, completing Breinhorn's Scroll, or getting the most nature points if the Discovery Dawning track gets all the way to the end. Let's get to my final thoughts. The immediate thing that you have to take note of in the Bermuda Crisis Discovery Dawning is that there are so many different things that you can do. Different paths to victory in different ways that you're going to get to that finish line, and the multiple different finish lines that you can actually cross in order to win the game. Do you want to focus on upgrading your camp as much as possible? You can do that. And the special abilities that you gain from doing that are going to give you more power over time and make that more likely. Or maybe you just want to get enough of those abilities to make your other paths easier and more viable. And the fact that you can also play on advanced mode, and players can alternate if they want to. One player can do the basic if it's easier for them. One player can do the more advanced one if it's easier for them, or better for them, if they're more experienced. The fact that you can go for that advanced mode and have even more potential upgrades is another interesting dynamic of the game. You could also go for the Mystique cards, which are going to give you not only special abilities, the power to screw over your opponents, but also the abilities to get nature points, which are going to be very important if the game comes down to a time crunch, which it obviously can and may in a lot of different circumstances, at which point, if you weren't working towards those nature points, someone might steal a win out from under you. It doesn't matter how many of those blue victory points you were able to achieve, because you weren't able to get up to 14 of them, although you could go for that victory path as well. The hardest one to get, of course, is the scroll, but you might be able to get into that position. You might, just say, oh, you've got a scroll over there. You're obviously not going to do anything with it. Why don't you trade it to me? And then you may get lucky and be able to get the other parts of the scroll as the game progresses. Knowing which decks of cards that it's in, you go for those as much as you possibly can. So there are all of these different routes you can go down, and it's totally your choice. And in the meantime, there's so many interesting dynamics going on with the card plays, especially with those artifacts. The artifacts being not only the impetus for the game to proceed through the rounds and push yourself, is like a timer, to push yourself towards the end where nature points would count, but also the fact that you can use it for a bevy of different abilities of your choice when you choose to discard it gives you a lot of flexibility. And again, using the different Mystique cards, all of which are very, very different and give you different powers. Like the Venture cards are more of a push your luck thing. The Catalyst cards are not a Mystique card, but then you gain them in different ways. But that's another interesting element because they're goals that you work towards for your victory point challenge. That's exclusively what they're for, but it may be an easier route for you. So there is a lot going on in the game. However, I will say that it's relatively easy to learn. It's relatively easy to set up and quick to play as well, compared to a lot of other games that have this much depth. So it's still, while there is so much going on, it's not and by any means overwhelming. So I think that this game is going to appeal to a lot of people who love resource management games like heavy Euros or even moderate to lightweight Euro games. People who like the idea of variable player powers and variable paths to victory. There's all that stuff going on here with this mystical theme, which is also going to appeal to a lot of people as well. So if you feel that you fall into one of those categories and you want to learn more about the game and maybe even get the game, you should check out the official Kickstarter project page. There's going to be a link up at the top corner of your screen, and then also down in the description section underneath this video, you can follow that link, go to the page, find out more information than I could possibly tell you here, and hopefully consider backing the project. That is the Bermuda Crisis Discovery Dawning from Lysander Games. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.